Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What's up guys, Dave here from Metal Epidemic, back with another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from French metal band Areis. Unsure how we pronounce the band name, whether it's Areis or Areis, not entirely sure, so apologies if we mispronounce it. But the band's self-titled debut was released on Wormholedeath on September 10th. Areis meaning to raise, an ancient Occitan. They are a four-piece band from the Occitania region of France. These guys formed in 2019 and contain ex-members of Converge and Right to the Void. The quartet takes inspiration from multiple genres and blends them with dark, occult and Occitanian-themed lyrics. The album was recorded at Titan's Lab recording studio and mixed and mastered by Lewis Johns. We actually played a track from this album on one of our podcasts a while back.
Ages ago, I feel.
Yeah, and I remember thinking at the time, this was definitely an interesting track and one that I'd like to hear kind of more of from the band. So when the album came in, it was a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest. I may have also mentioned in the past, I do have a wee bit of love for French metal bands. Just putting that out there. Maybe I mentioned that before. So there is that also. I don't know about you, but I find like French metal bands do have a particular vibe or tone about them. Like sometimes you can hear it in the vocals, you know, and you can hear it a little bit with this band, but even musically, there's something very distinctive about French metal. It has a certain je ne sais quoi.
Oh, what? Dave's brought French to this review. I wasn't prepared for this. Give me a second, Dave. Oui.
I am fluent in that one French phrase. So straight off the bat, these guys, they do like to mix things up style-wise. They kind of like weave in and out of everything from straight up metal to hardcore, post-hardcore, a little bit of black metal in there. There's hints of metalcore, a little bit of post-rock in there at times. But they kind of lay a lot of that out, you know, in kind of plain sight on the first track, A Wretched Vow, which is, it's probably one of the more kind of up-tempo, kind of hardcore. I've seen a lot of kind of hardcore influences on that first track. You know, it comes flying out the gate, that type of track. A lot of kind of typical hardcore rhythms and tempos, but it doesn't sit at one pace for its entirety. You know, as the track goes on, they bring in some more kind of mid-pace grooves, a bit of melody that also has that kind of blackened side, you know, that kind of pops its head up in the form of some blasts and some slightly darker riffs, but and vocally as well, you know, there's a few different tones and textures going on. So even like after one track of this album, I was quite intrigued to hear where they were going to go with this. And as the kind of album goes on, it very much felt like this was a band that were trying to pull out all the stops, you know, and show their writing capabilities and kind of put their name on the map with this release. I mean, it's a debut, so they're obviously trying their best to put out their best kind of material. What I think they do really well is I think they do blend the styles really well. I don't think they let any style become too dominant in their sound. You know, you can hear, oh, there's a bit of hardcore going on there, but then you can hear, you know, oh, that's a bit kind of metalcore-ish, or a little bit kind of black inside. And at no point did I feel like it was just like, this is a hardcore album or this is a metalcore album. The hardcore thing is always in there in some form, but I felt like the balance of it against the more kind of like the groovy stuff or the blackened parts all felt really proportionate. And even when they're kind of pushing that kind of hardcore sound to the forefront, it's not straight up like hardcore as you would like fully expect it either. The chords are often like kind of peppered with something a bit more melancholic or a bit more ominous to give the tracks a slightly darker tone. They also like to use a lot of kind of background kind of guitar melodies to kind of push a particular feel over the tracks. You can hear it on, there's a track called Of Gold and Blood where they have an almost like a kind of post-rock type lead work that's just kind of like simmering in the background of the choruses, and I really dug that. I think that really, it kind of accentuated the kind of magnitude of some of the tracks. And as much as I kind of enjoyed the first few tracks of the album, I actually think it really starts to hit its stride around the middle of the album. Track 4 probably for me, when it started to really like, I found more of a groove, and the tracks really started to flow much better. There's a track called Eternal Curse, which had some really cool breakdowns, which they don't overdo at all. It's not one of those albums that's just, a breakdown, here it comes, predictable, not at all. But when they do something like that, because they don't overuse it, it does really stand out. And there was a track called You Are the Best at Your Worst. For me, I think that was probably my favourite track of the album. Probably the most memorable track, and probably one of the more like, the structure of it was pretty straightforward. The main riff had a very thick tone and a solid groove to it that really kind of got stuck in your head after a couple of verses. But the track also had a little bit of melody blended in with some kind of big epic chords as well. Track 8, Lupin Maudit, was...
He's on a roll now, I'll tell you.
Another good example of like that kind of metallic sound coming through, but blended with some groove heavy riffs that are, again, really infectious, but also had a bit of a like atmosphere to them, reminding the bands like Crowning or The Drowned God a little bit as well. I think vocally, as much as like this is a really varied in terms of the texture of the vocals, and they're delivered like really well, it was the one thing that didn't really stick with me afterwards. They just didn't really seem to sink their hooks in during the album. I think they do sit within a kind of hardcore, kind of metalcore type vein for the most part, and I think they really accentuate the heaviness of the album, most definitely. I just didn't feel like there was a moment where they really stood out from everything else, and had like a kind of shining moment. I was constantly waiting on a moment of melody, if I'm honest. Like I was just there's this perfect moment where the musically it's just sitting like it needs something melodic there, and it never really happened. I think it would have just kind of been perfect. Just every now and again, not overused, but just my opinion. Production wise though, I really liked the kind of overall tone and the balance of this. Lewis Johns, I've mentioned it before, great at what he does. I love the stuff he's done with Svalbard and Conjurer. The recent Epiphanic Truth as well had a fantastic production on it. So this is very similar in quality, to be honest. It's got plenty of like heft to it, but it's also packed with a lot of atmosphere. So no complaints on the production front from me. Duncan, what did you think? What did you make of this one?
Interestingly enough, before we started recording, we were drawing battle lines here to give the people a peek behind the curtain, because I said I quite liked the vocals, and Dave was like, "Are you sure about that?" I actually, everything you've just said is right. I just don't necessarily see it as a negative. Right. I think that's where I'm coming from. I'm of the opinion of that sometimes bands, and this might be because I was a vocalist in a band. Sometimes as a vocalist in a band, you are not the same as everyone else in the band. Like, so if you are a drummer, you can very easily switch to play different drum sounds, or you can add an electronic element in there or do something different. If you're a guitarist, there are pedals that you can use that can make your guitar sound clean or really dirty. If you're a vocalist and you can't do soaring melody, there's fuck all you can do about that. And I get the feeling that that's probably where this band sits, in that the music in the background at times feel like it's pushing in directions which you're right, you're sitting back going, hit me with the soaring melody, I'm ready. And what you get is a kind of almost shouty hardcore vocal that goes over the top of it. And I think that's most likely, and I don't want to cast aspersions, and if the vocalist has the voice of an angel, then, and he's keeping it himself, that's fine. That would be where I would bring it out. The fact that he didn't do it makes me think that the vocalist probably can't do that. Now, there are ways to get around that. One of them is to invite guest vocalists on that can do that. That becomes problematic when you do live performances. And bands tend not to do that much. Another option is you can not do vocals over it and make it an instrumental section. But that's really your only choices, and that's kind of where I felt. Now, there are moments of kind of quasi-melody in there, just not to those soaring levels. I think that's probably in line with the band not having a member of the band who can sing like that. So taking that out, I don't think that should stop the band pushing in the musical direction that they do, because some of those moments that you were mentioning where they really kind of push this kind of darkened atmosphere are you know, quite chilling to listen to, and I think it works really well. I think they do throw a lot in here. My complaint is I think at times the album loses its way a little on some tracks, where I kind of feel like they're obviously very accomplished at what they're doing with all the music styles, but I think on certain songs I kind of feel like, did we need that there? Does this song need to be on this album? Production is brilliant. Like, once again, everything's audible, nice, clear, but there's lots of stuff happening in the background, and it's balanced very, very well, so at no point does anything overshadow anything else. Like you were mentioning, the kind of post-rock kind of lead work stuff that's in the background is really, really, really interesting, and there is a temptation when you hear it and hear how good it sounds to overuse that, and the fact that the band don't do that means that they've got a good grasp on their craft. Once again, going to totally agree with you, they don't fall into the trappings of every song needs a breakdown. They don't do that, and you are right, as a result, when they do arrive, they feel like events on the album, and that's what I want. Like, to me, a breakdown, beatdown, however you want to fucking frame it, those like used to be events on an album, and now they've just become the fucking norm. So when they kick in, no one's surprised about them. People can usually count them in the first time you're listening, so it's fine, you know, let's go, here we go, boom. You can usually tell when they're coming. On this album, they didn't necessarily land where I expected them to do, but when they did, they were welcome. They changed the tone, they changed the pace, they really, really worked. The vocals I enjoyed. I liked the kind of, there was this, there was a kind of blackened, tinged, heavier vocal, and then there was the very much standard kind of 90s hardcore shouty vocal, which I really, that's the one that I enjoyed probably the most, and it's the thing that when you were mentioning how it's always kind of rooted in hardcore, I think a lot of that's to do with that vocal. That vocal delivery is certainly what always brings it back, and it's good to have a lynch point of that to go off, but always have something that easily draws you back to your core. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we're that different overall on reviews of the album. The vocal thing, I see where you're coming from, and I would have loved it as well. My suspicion though is I think it's not there because no one can do it, and that's a shame. It certainly shouldn't stop them doing what they're doing, and there's ways to get around it. You could bring in a vocalist that can do melody just to bolster that up, and maybe that's, if they're going to do more of that in the next album or expand on that, that's definitely a recommendation. You know,
maybe even some synths might work as well. Maybe a little bit of melody.
Could totally do it. Yeah. It's like, if you're doing that on some level, it then weighs up to what's the vocalist doing. Is he still doing the shouty stuff? Is that going to sit with? I don't know. There's plenty of questions. It certainly did not ruin my enjoyment in this at all. The only kind of negative I have is I think at times there's a bit too much. Like, it's like one additional element in a song where I'm like that. And it's not that it's done bad at all, and they can clearly fucking play it, but it kind of feels like you're saying, it's like, this is our first album, so we need to show the best of everything we've got. And on paper that's brilliant, but at times that doesn't always lead to the best album with the best songs.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, so ratings for this one. I actually think these guys are ones to watch. I think, as we've said, for a debut album, this is really solid. I really enjoyed the balance, the styles, the way they've blended them. I love the inclusion of those like post-rock melodies. I would love to hear more of that on future releases. And I agree with you. I think there are some tracks where they nail the formula spot on, and there's others where they go slightly too far and it becomes just too much in the one track. I did also feel like the album took a little bit to warm up. As I mentioned, I think when they hit that kind of track 4 or 5, that's when I started to feel like, right, now here we go, this album's actually starting to pick up some momentum and it's kind of flowing now. Vocally, it's just a personal preference. I just felt like I needed something else. I just needed a little bit more. I think it delivers that that particular style really well. The tone is what you'd want from a band clearly influenced, heavily by hardcore. I just didn't feel like it was leaving me with any kind of lasting impression. Not bad by any means. The guy can clearly scream his lungs out, and the two tones work really well. I just think it needed something else, just somewhere, for me anyway, personally. I would probably go 3.5 out of 5 on this one for me. Duncan, what are you thinking?
I knew we would be there or thereabouts. 3.5 for me as well.
Nice.
I thoroughly enjoyed what I heard on this.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit too much of that eager first album thing where you're just you're trying to hit every mark and every demographic and every interest. I love the vocals. I'm totally with you. I think they need, if the vocalists themselves can't deliver that, if they can't sing like that, and some people can't, or got great screamy voices, like you're never going to hear fucking Corpse Grinder out there singing a cappella. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But what he does, totally suits that. But as that band is pushing those elements out, it kind of feels like there's a missed opportunity to get something in there. That might be a new member of the band. That might be experimenting with other things. And they've clearly got everything else tied down. And I think a second, like their next album, bit more focused in. I think we could be on to another one of those bands 2-3 years down the line where we're like that. Yeah, France is awesome at this, aren't they? And we all agree. Or I say, oui. 3.5 out of 5 from me.
Nice. So this one drops on September 10th. Self-titled. It's out on Wormholedeath. Check out the band. I'll put a little link in the description below to their Facebook, and if there's any pre-orders, I'll stick that in there as well. And let us know what you think. I think they've released one single so far at the point of this recording anyway, so let us know what you think. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That's the review. Thank you for checking it out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.